Today we're going to start talking about special senses. Senses can be divided into two large categories: somatic senses that come from the body. Somatic senses include such sensations as touch or body position. So mechanoreceptors, for instance, sense touch. Temperature, thermoreceptors can sense temperature. Body position in space and muscle contraction, that's proprioceptors. And pain, that is nociceptors. Special senses can come from eyes through photoreceptors that sense light, ears, which contain interesting special mechanoreceptors that sense vibrations, providing us with a sensation of hearing and sensation of balance. Nose and tongue. Nose chemoreceptors give us the sense of smell, while chemoreceptors in the tongue give us the sense of taste or gustation. Now, there is an interesting feature that is called a sensory adaptation. When we constantly have a stimulation of certain sense, we may decrease our level of sensation, so we are not aware of that sensation. For instance, when we wear clothes, we're not really appreciating the fact that clothes touch our skin because the stimulation is so permanent that our brain is basically cutting it off. The main role of somatic senses and special senses is to protect humans from the danger so we can grow and reach reproductive age and give birth to our offspring. Obviously, the inability to the lack of one of the senses significantly decreases the chances of survival for a particular organism. A good example, color vision, helps us to identify the better fruits, the better foods. The first sense that we're going to be talking about is the sense of smell or olfaction. So, olfactory epithelium is located at the top of the nasal chamber, the top of the nasal passage. And when we inhale the air through the nose, chemicals that are in the air get dissolved in the mucus, and these dissolved chemicals bind to the receptors in the olfactory epithelium. When chemicals bind to the receptors in the olfactory epithelium, they generate a nerve signal, which is then sent through the olfactory bulb into the brain. Now, you know how smell sensations often trigger certain emotions. You may find the smell pleasant or unpleasant. You may find it familiar, unfamiliar. It may trigger positive or negative emotions. This is the part where limbic system, the system responsible for emotions, comes to play. Smells play an incredibly high role in activating different parts of the limbic system, such as, for instance, hippocampus and amygdala, responsible for our memories and a good part of emotions. The next special sense that we're going to be talking about is taste. Taste and smell often come together. Actually, your sense of taste is going to be different if your nose is stuffy and you can't properly sense smell. Receptors for that sensation are located in the taste bud. You can see the receptor cells and the cilia, also called gustatory hair sticking out of the taste bud. Approximately 10,000 taste buds are located mostly on the tongue, but also in your lips, on your cheek, and even in your larynx. Taste buds on your tongue are located on the very, very small structures, these small bumps that are called papillae. For instance, these are fungiform papillae, these are foliate papillae, and these are vowelate papillae. Taste buds, the location of a taste bud in the papillae shown here. Taste buds can distinguish 5 different taste categories. When you consume food, food chemicals get dissolved in the saliva. They interact with the receptors on the receptor cells on the gustatory hair, and if this chemical is sweet, like sugar, it will trigger the sweet taste. The role of the sweet taste is to identify the energy-rich food. If the chemical is acidic, sour, okay, it will trigger corresponding receptors. And originally, this taste evolved to identify possibly bad food. That's why we say food went sour. Salty taste is triggered, well, unsurprisingly, by salt. Humans need electrolytes. Humans need salt. So the role of this taste is to identify foods rich in salt. Bitter taste is the most sensitive type of taste that we have. Bitter taste allows us to taste poisons. Fifth taste, or umami, is triggered by protein-rich foods such as beef or cheese or pork, and it is necessary to detect a protein-rich food. Once the food chemicals interact with the receptors on the receptor cells, they generate a nerve signal, an action potential that reaches the brain. Now, the third special sense that we're going to be talking about is hearing. We're going to talk about hearing first and then balance. So anatomically, ear can be divided into external, all the way up here, middle, middle ear, and, well, strictly speaking, let me start it over, okay? So I should highlight it better. So it can be divided into the outer ear, middle ear, and inner ear. I'll say that's better. So outer, middle, and inner. Outer ear consists of the pinna or auricle, that's basically ear, and the auditory canal. You see a bit of a earwax inside of it. Earwax is properly fine to be found in the auditory canal. It protects it, absorbs all the dirt and dust that gets into the canal. And then as you go from the auditory canal towards the middle ear, you will encounter the eardrum or the tympanic membrane. So that's the tympanic membrane right here, or eardrum. Tympanic membrane, when you hear a sound, tympanic membrane vibrates, and vibration of the tympanic membrane also vibrate 3 auditory ossicles: malleus, incus, and stapes. malleus, incus, and the smallest bone in the human body, stapes. Stapes overlies the oval window. You can see that the middle ear is connected through the auditory or pharyngotympanic or eustachian tube. It is connected to the nasopharynx. And the function of the pharyngotympanic tube is to equalize the pressure between the middle ear here and the environment. When you have kind of, blocked ears when you fly on a plane, you need to open your mouth so the pressure in your middle ear and the pressure in the plane will equalize. Now, vibrations of the stapes here, they lead to the vibration at the oval window, okay? And you can see that beyond the oval window is the fluid-filled structure called cochlea. So the function of that fluid-filled structure is hearing. The main parts of the cochlea are the vestibular duct, tympanic duct or tympanic canal, the organ of Corti. Organ of Corti essentially is responsible for hearing. So once again, let me show you. Vestibular duct, tympanic duct, and the organ of Corti. Organ of Corti contains so-called hair cells, cells that are responsible for hearing sensation. They have special structures called stereocilia. They look like hairs at the top of the cell. If we want to picture it, it will look like this. Okay. So these stereocilia are overlaid by the tictorial membrane, and tictorial membrane will vibrate, and vibrations of the tictorial membrane will start bending the stereocilia. Bending of stereocilia will lead to depolarization and generation of the nerve signal in the organ of Corti, and that nerve signal eventually will reach the brain, so you will have a nerve impulse that corresponds to the sound. So let's go over the path for vibrations once more. It first enters pinna, it's not in the picture, and then through the external auditory canal reaches the tympanic membrane. Vibrations of the tympanic membrane stimulate vibrations of the auditory ossicles, malleus first, then incus, then stapes. Vibrations of the stapes lead to the vibrations of the fluid in the vestibular canal, which then leads to the vibrations of the organ of Corti. Vibrations of the organ of Corti essentially are converted into the nerve signal. These vibrations then continue into the tympanic canal and then leave the tympanic canal through so-called round window. So when people are deaf, there can be two types of deafness. Deafness can be conduction deafness, when one of the parts of that system that transmits vibrations is damaged. So for instance, auditory ossicles are fused together, or the eardrum is ruptured. In this case, hearing aids may help. They specifically increase the loudness, the sound, increasing the transmission of the vibrations to the cochlea. Nerve or senso-neural deafness is the deafness due to the damage to the neural structures in the ear. For example, cochlear nerve that delivers signals to the brain, or hair cells. For example, people who listen to a loud noise or loud music for an extended period of time, that may lead to the damage of hair cells and sensorineural deafness. The treatment for that kind of a condition is cochlear implant, which directly converts the vibrations of the sound vibrations into the electrical impulses that can be sent through the nerve. Now we figure that cochlea is the structure responsible for hearing. Now what about structures responsible for balance? Well, let's go back for a second and let's take a look at the structures of the inner ear. Along with the cochlea, you can see vestibule and semicircular canals. So vestibule and semicircular canals are the structures responsible for the sense of balance. Structure that is responsible for so-called static or gravitational equilibrium, that is sensing the horizontal and vertical linear acceleration. For instance, when you walk or you jump, that structure is vestibule, shown here. Now, inside the vestibule, there are two specific sensory mini organs called utricle and saccule. In these organs, you can see hair cells, which hairs are embedded into so-called otolith membrane. When you move, due to the inertia, cells and otolith membrane move at different speeds, and hair cells are bending, and that bending leads to a generation of the electrical signal, which then goes to the brain as the sensation of acceleration. So utricle senses horizontal acceleration since it's located horizontally, while saccule senses vertical acceleration. Semicircular canals contain slightly different structures responsible for sensing the balance. The role of semicircular canals is to detect dynamic or rotational equilibrium. So when you turn your head left or right, any rotations of your head in any of the geometric planes will be detected by semicircular canals. These rotational movements of your head are detected by the structure called ampulla. In the ampulla, you can find a little cupula here, which embeds the hairs of the hair cells. And when somebody moves, the fluid inside of the semicircular canals, it will bend the cupula left or right, depending on where you're moving, and that bending of cupula will bend the hairs of the cell and will trigger the electrical signal. So that concludes our conversation about first three special senses, and in our next chapter we're going to talk about eye.